Welcome to REHAU Academy on Air. This podcast is a way for us to present non-technical information related to REHAU in a Q&A format with industry experts. I'm Max Rohr, the REHAU Academy Manager for North America. My guest today is Dan Foley. Dan is the president of Foley Mechanical, and we are at a historic renovation in Loudoun County, Virginia, with Scott Kasparovitz, and we are talking about kind of an interesting project today, Dan. So why don't the two of you give me a little bit of a background of where you started with this house?
Sure. How about if I start, Dan?
Go for it.
So the project that we're currently about halfway through with was started in 2015, really, actually, early 2016. And it is the renovation of a home that was constructed in 1938. Actually, it was delivered in 1938. It was built to a very high standard in the 1930s, very refined interior space. The exterior is stone and slate roof. And my intent in doing the renovation was twofold. First, to bring it up to modern standards without obviously doing so. And second, in doing that, to retain to the extent possible its classic Virginia traditional look and feel. And I think we're well underway to accomplishing that.
Great.
Scott, in 30 years, I've done a lot of renovations, but this is the first one where the house is going to look identical to it, look like it looked 60 years ago, with the new house built in the inside. Am I describing that accurately?
That's accurate. And even with the new house built in the inside, Dan, we will go to great lengths to, I want to use the word disguise, but to hide any of the modern components of much of the work that you're doing to keep it feeling like it's the 1930s rather than, of course, the next century. And just a couple of points. One of the immediate attractions I had to Dan is I realized to accomplish what I've just described, it would take fundamentally an extraordinary knowledge of the vast array of HVAC options that exist for this house. And to the extent that those would be the latest technology, it would take a technical understanding that would be required to integrate those. I mentioned we wanted to keep the 1930s feel. Part of that was eliminating outdoor units, and the other overlay to all of the design was we wanted to be as efficient as possible and as flexible in the operation of these systems. And from the outset, our first meeting with Dan, it was quite clear that we had, I think, a match in Dan's skill set and firm experience and my expectations, and we've evolved down this roadway very nicely over the design, development, and now the installation phase.
And in order to achieve your goals, you can't do that in one pass. You can't design it and say it's done. It's taken 6 or 7 passes, meetings, looking at stuff, and then finding a better way to do it. This is good, that's better. And it took multiple times to do that, to hide the ductwork, no bulkheads, no chases, and still achieve a mechanical system that's going to deliver heating and cooling.
And thank you for that. It's, I think, a very important point. We started out with a basic concept. It was very highly evolved. We spent a lot of time getting to that basic concept. But I will tell you, with each visit that Dan has made to the site, there have been small enhancements and evolutions that further improve the system. So it's really an extraordinary combination of experience, product knowledge, and I think team participation on the part of Dan's team members that brings us through this constantly evolving process to make what's really good even better.
And it was an interesting job site to walk through because this, when you described it to me on the phone, Dan, it sounded like it was going to be a box with a smaller modern box inside of it, but it's really not like that. It's a very mixed construction style. There's a lot of maintained stonework and woodwork and wood flooring that mixes right in and blends well with new construction. So what were some of the hardest parts of getting a modern system into a building that has some non-modern pieces?
I have to add, with a very fussy guy from a standpoint of what he would accept, and this is where Dan has done an extraordinary job of being a diplomat as well.
Well, I've worked in 30 years with hundreds and hundreds of homeowners and dozens of architects. There's 2 people that come to mind that have an eye for detail. One's a world-class architect, and the other's Scott. Those 2 are in their own category. And I say that from a standpoint, not in a bad way. It's, you know what you want, and you're not going to accept anything less than that. You've challenged me and my crew to deliver that, and if we're not going to deliver that, we have no business being in your house. That being said, if something's not going to work or it's a bad idea, it's my job to say, hey, Scott, I know what you want. This is not going to work. How about this? And we refine from a wide angle to a point to get to what he wants.
And you mentioned also that aesthetically, to keep the property as clean as possible. Why don't you tell me a little bit about the geosystem that you're putting in and why that was a good fit?
Well, we had the option of going with traditional split systems, chilled water system, but both of those required mechanical equipment outside the house.
Which was a non-starter.
Yeah, where we're going to put that?
Told Dan from the outset, nothing outside.
On a historic property. So the next step was to go to the geo. We used the REHAU geo, 4-pipe, high conductivity grout, 400-foot wells. Why? Because I got one chance to do that right. I don't get to come back and do it again if I undersized it or used the wrong product. So that's not where I'm going to cut corners. Second of all, it's all hidden. The wells are hidden under a circular driveway with a vault in a central architectural landscaped area where you can't see it. The pipe runs underground under the foundation to our mechanical room, so it's invisible. It's quiet, efficient, invisible.
And the ability to use the land as a benefit here instead of for that big structure, it's nice to have some assistance from a renewable energy source.
It's perfect. It really met my design criteria from that green standpoint as well.
Great.
Yeah, so, again, I just have to note here, this is a place that we didn't have a specific plan for how those wells would be arrayed, where they would actually be placed, and this was part of this design evolution that went so well in this process. We worked that through and came up with, I think, a very elegant approach to that.
Right. If I recall, it started out as a rectangular parking area, and for whatever reason, you had to change that to a circular driveway. So we're flexible; we can work with that.
We adapted as we went.
Yeah, my well driller was able to accommodate that, and if it wasn't going to work, I was going to say we can't do that, but we were able to make it work. Keep the loop lengths, the laterals within reason. So we have to be flexible on a job like this.
Yeah,
it can't be rigid. This is how it's going to be. It's got to be flexible.
And I'm sure some of the little details change day to day as you're working with an older structure and that type of thing. So
sure.
I'm
for example, Scott decided he wanted to put renewable for the hot water, so we're going to add a solar array. That was an 11th hour ad. Again, you got to be flexible. You can't say no, we can't. Let's find a way to do it. I want it on this roof. It can't go on this roof. It's going on that roof. Okay, let's see what the changes are. And again, we got to accommodate that to meet the architecture, meet the aesthetics, and also meet the mechanical requirements. All three of those come together.
That's a great point. I determined actually as the house was being built or rebuilt and the new dormers were going on, that there was a single roof surface that would not be visible from anywhere on the property, one spot. Yeah. I said, Dan, if we do solar, that's the place to do it. And Dan's accommodated that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a compromise, but we're preheating it. We've got the boiler for hot water, so we're preheating the well water. Actually, we're preheating it twice. We're capturing the waste heat from the geo before it goes into the ground to preheat the cold water coming in. Then we go to the solar tank and do our indirect for domestic hot water. We'll be able to deliver unlimited hot water in this project.
And like we were talking about earlier too, that any BTU from the sun is better than no BTUs from the sun. So
agreed. So we have the renewable, potential from the well system with the geothermal as well as the hot water generation from the very discrete roof-mounted panels.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about the property then. How did you come into this project?
I actually am the fourth owner of the property. The original builders were very prominent members of the Middleburg community. Actually, the gentleman who built the house was the president of our local bank. The house has an interesting history. It's gone through two full family developments with the first owner and the second owner. The third owner was a very interesting woman named Pamela Harriman, who ultimately was the U.S. ambassador to France during the Bill Clinton administration. And during the time that she owned the house, it was used very much for entertaining, and many of the Clinton era contacts of the family spent a good deal of time here.
Sure.
I was the fourth owner and purchased it after the Harriman era on the property.
Okay. And it seems like it's going to be a fun place to have guests visit as well in the future.
I think it'll be extraordinary for that.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. And on a note on that, this ties right into what Dan's doing. One of the things that we're really focused on will be the guest facilities in the main house. So there will be actually 3 guest rooms that we've said from the outset will have 5-star ambiance. They will have all of the, I'm going to call it bells and whistles of a classic 5-star hotel. And one of the, with a couple points, one is they will each have a discrete air conditioning system associated with the room. So they'll be able to control the temperature and their space, both in the summer through the air conditioning system. We're using VRF air conditioning systems, and they'll be able to control the wintertime temperature through the floor hydronic system as well. And in addition to that, Dan will be powering our heated towel bars with a hot water loop. It will really be a first-class facility. So we are very focused on the guest experience when the house is complete.
And that was a challenge, Scott. Certainly the bedrooms are easy. We just make those their own zone. They have their own thermostat control. If they want it 70, 76, 68, whatever they want, they can do that. The challenge is on the first floor, your entertainment level. So you've got a great room that may have one person in there or may have 50 people in there. And I need to design around that. So how do you design around that? And the key you hit on was VRF. That stands for Variable Refrigerant Flow. It's a variable speed air conditioner that can ramp down from full capacity to 20% capacity. So it's not oversized when you're not using it. But come July, when you have a party, and it's 100 degrees outside in the DC area, humid as a swamp, and you got 50 people packed into a room with south-facing glass, I need to cool that. So we need to design around that as well. And that was the challenge, fitting that all in there without oversizing it. And the VRF technology lent itself very well to that. Also with the geo-based, our condensing temperature is the same in July or as it is in January. We're using the ground as the heat source or the heat sink, depending on the season. So it can cool very well at high ambient temperatures.
And it seems like it's just a very fun mix of the best, hybrid heating and cooling technology on the market, and done in a way so it's minimally invasive. Walking through, you were showing me some of the really creative ways that you had to route some of the duct work to keep it hidden in the walls and keep it away from the incredible structure that is the house instead of right on top of it.
So that's key. So in these rooms where you're going to have great sight lines, we spent an hour with the architect, the builder, and Scott to figure out how can we hide these returns. It's easy to put two big returns on the sidewall. It's easy. Anybody can do that. Okay, how can we do this without compromising the integrity of the design where you can't see them? And between me, Scott, the builder, and their architect, we came up with a solution where we have a trim piece that hides the return with a 1-inch slot and allows a return path without being able to see it.
I would
That's
say
the challenge.
Brilliantly executed, Dan. Thank you.
We haven't done it yet. But
No, but
no,
we're moving towards it. I would say, again, in consideration of the work that Dan's done on that aspect alone, that Dan and his team have probably spent more time on those type of issues than most firms would do in the complete design of the system. I mean, it's been detail after detail that we've gone through and made better or evolved as the project has moved forward.
And to be fair, that was made clear to us going in. So your choice is either do it or don't accept the job. You can't accept the job and not accept the challenge. Those two don't go together.
Yeah.
So I can appreciate that. It's not been easy. It's difficult at times, but if it was easy, anybody would do it. And my benefit is that I've got guys such as Ron, such as Poppy, such as Brian that know this stuff inside out, and I just task them with the job. They do it, and that's the hard part. I got the easy part.
Yeah.
I'm promising to Scott how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
Ron and the guys have to deliver.
The
They have to
work,
deliver. It's easy to say yes. It's hard to execute it.
Yeah.
And my guys have stepped up to the challenge to do it.
And I think that one of the interesting things for me is I've been to a lot of job sites that were well executed, and they met the initial goal of whatever the project was. But this one is fun for me because it seems like the two of you really like and respect what the other person is trying to do here.
Very
that
much so.
This is a challenge for both of you to build
Indeed.
a house like this, and it's fun to see that, and the fact that the two of you are sitting down in a historic renovation project to talk about things going well, I think is not something that happens all the time. I've been involved with a couple historic projects that were a little bit dicier. So I think that that's really fun, and thank the two of you for sitting down with me. One of the questions that I usually ask my guests, and I'm putting both of you on the spot a little bit, but who is your favorite teacher and why? Do you have a certain person that sticks out?
This is throughout our
it could be
broad
anything.
scope educational background, both in classroom and out.
Yeah.
Actually, I do, and it comes right to mind. The first calculus professor I had was a guy named Tony Buffa. This was in upstate New York, and he worked for a community college. He was an extraordinary teacher, and took a guy who had some real anxiety about how we might perform in calculus, which was needed for the degrees I ultimately received, and just brought me through beautifully. It was a combination of just pure interpersonal talent, a love and a mastery of mathematics, and just an absolute desire to share that with those who he taught. So quite an experience.
Great. What about you, Dan?
Well, I got my start with a company called Arlington Heating back in the mid-'80s. And the founder of the company, Wooly Croker, was semi-retired. His son owned the company. It was my direct boss. But he came in every Saturday, and we kind of went around from job site to job site. And he was my mentor. He kind of took me under his wing. I never had a grandfather growing up. Both my grandfathers died when I was, one before I was born, the other one when I was 4, so I never really knew him. He was my grandfather I never had. But he was also very strict about how he wanted his jobs done. He sold the job one time and entrusted me. I'd been with the company for a year at the point. Didn't know what I was doing. Went out there. I'd been out a little late the night before. Put it in. Didn't quite line up. I jammed it in there. Flipped the switch. It worked. I went home. Next day I came into the office and I saw that job was back on the schedule. I said, Mr. Croker, there's a mistake. I finished that job. He said, you're right. Now you're going to go back and do it the right way. And I put my tail between my legs and I learned there's only one way to do the job. You can't half-ass it and call it a job done. And it taught me right from the get-go. If you're going to do it, you're going to do it this way, or you're not going to do it, or you're not going to work here. So he was very strict and to the point on that end. And after I got paddled and taken to the woodshed, he took me under his arm and showed me all that he knew. And I wrote, I write for, like you, I write for PHC News. I wrote a whole column about that and how much he meant to me. He died 20 years ago, but he taught me all that I know about this business. And it's not just nuts and bolts. There's more to it than that.
Yes. So one last comment on that regard, because another area that Dan and I think shared an immediate bond on is we have a little rule here that there's no such thing as unfinished space in this house. Meaning that even if it's something that no one sees generally, it has to be perfect.
Yeah.
And I think one of the areas that we connected on very early on was we share that. And I will tell you that the work that Dan has done that will be covered up meets my high standards, and we're really looking forward to the work that will be done that will be visible in the mechanical rooms. We hope to have you back to show you that at some point.
Great, yeah. It's going to be a showpiece down in the...
It will be a showpiece.
Yes.
Great. All right, well, thank you, Scott and Dan, for joining me, and good luck with the rest of the project.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Max.
To find REHAU technical training, go to na.rehau.com/academy and check out REHAU America's YouTube channel. Our Twitter handle is @REHAU, and you can always ask your sales rep for more information about local trainings.